This historic announcement coincided with a prisoner swap between the U.S. and Cuba, which of course Eric was talking about. This included the release of American contractor Judy Gross. He'd been jailed in Cuba for 5 years. Cuban authorities say he tried to smuggle illegal technology onto the island. Gross thanked all those involved with his release and said the Cuban people are suffering due to, quote, mutually belligerent policies. Joining us now from New York is Rabbi Elie Abadie. We're going to start with your role in all of this. Give us some background on your relationship with Alan. I know you saw him, you visited with him. Give us just kind of the role that you played in all of this.
Yes, almost 3 years ago, I was contacted by a relative of Alan, who I know from the community, and asked me if I can do something to intercede in his freedom. To which I contacted a dear friend of mine and a congregant of mine, James Barenthal, who is a Cuban-American attorney. And he had contact with Cuban government. We made 2 trips there, and in the second trip, I was able to visit Alan, that he had lost 100 pounds unwillingly, and that he was demanding an American physician to examine him. During my visit, the Cuban government allowed me to examine him freely by myself, and they allowed me free access to his medical records. And at that time, my diagnosis was that he was not dying of cancer. He did not have cancer at that time. And his weight loss was strictly because of a diet regime that he was following for his own health reasons. And also, he was doing a lot of exercise and sports. And that's how I got to know Alan at that time, and I was able to fulfill his desire of having an American physician examine him independently than the Cuban physicians.
Your reaction today when you heard the news?
I was, of course, exhilarated and thrilled about it. In the last few weeks, I was sensing something was happening, but I wasn't sure exactly about it. But for the last 2 years since I saw him, I have been pressing the U.S. government officially, unofficially, and also in the media that they should sit down with the Cuban government and negotiate his release. Of course, at the beginning, there was no willingness from the part of the U.S. government, as far as I know, to sit down and negotiate his release. But I guess things have changed since then, especially his medical condition, I understand, in the last several months has deteriorated. So I am sure that that really worried the Cuban government and also the American government.
Rabbi, just a couple of months ago, our correspondent in Havana, Michael Voss, had a chance to sit down with Judy Gross, talk to her about efforts to get her husband out. I want to get your thoughts in just a moment, but here's what she had to say.
At this point, more negotiations. The U.S., I guess, giving into some of what Cuba wants, and Cuba giving into what, they want. And it needs to keep happening. They don't, sometimes in negotiations, they get to a point and they say, okay, that's it, we don't agree. This needs to happen until and we're not going to stop until he's home. We're going to continue.
We're not going to stop. I'm sure you felt much the same way. How much of that do you think played a role in what happened today?
Well, I think in any negotiations, there's always a give and take. Neither side wins or neither side loses. There has to be only the willingness of both sides to reach a compromise, especially for a humanitarian reason. So what we have been really pressing the U.S. government is really to do so, to really face reality in a sense and realize that this is an American citizen imprisoned in Cuba for whatever reason the Cubans say he was in prison, even though it's denied by the United States, but to sit down and really be able to obtain his release. Now, I do think that his health situation in the last several months may have played a role in the United States wanting to do something, but also I think there is a clear understanding from the Obama administration that things have to change. Cuba has been changing in the last several years. I've seen it with my own eyes during the 2 trips that I made, where the first trip, most of the cars that I saw, they were from the 50s and the 40s, and only less than 6 months later, I made another trip and I already saw many cars of 2013 at that time it was. And so Cuba was opening up, was changing. Definitely a private initiative, private ownership on a small scale of stores, of homes was taking place. The embargo was solely kept by the United States. The rest of the world was not joining the embargo. There were plenty of businesses from the Europeans and also South Americans. So I think the United States was losing economic grounds over there.
Rabbi,
having Cuba the largest. Yes.
I was just going to say, Rabbi Abadie, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously a very important day for you, and we appreciate you taking time and joining us from New York to share your thoughts.